But Brian Johnson, who is that guy?
Yeah, that was my predecessor.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
But I want to talk about that guy because the thing that I find so interesting about you, and again, I'll talk more about this later too, is that you just kind of jumped on the scene, seemingly what looked like, because I've been doing social media forever since the beginning, with a roadmap. Like you had a roadmap. That's what it looked like to me because I've been doing this for a very long time. And like you came right onto the scene with community cues, like a lot of marketing stuff behind you. But who is Brian Johnson?
Yeah.
Like,
well, first, thank you for the shirt.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate the gift, and I'm going to give it over here to Liver Queen. Here's what I'll say about Brian Johnson. So we're all born primal. We're all born raw, wild, free, right?
Yeah.
And then we started to domesticate ourselves, right? We started to like become civilized. We started to become mindlessly compliant to our detriment. And then it's really tough to go back, right? And then when you can find that primal part of you, right? I say, certain times in life, that primal barbarian guy comes out. He comes out in the gym when you're hitting PRs. He comes out in a life and death situation. He comes out in a fight situation. And if he comes out enough, it's like getting a taste for blood. And then he comes out and he breaks out of that fucking cage because he says, you know what? I like that barbarian guy more. I like being raw, primal, wild and free.
Yeah.
Because it's freeing, right? And you know how it is, like when you're with your best friends, when you're completely vulnerable, when you can be silly and stupid and zero fucking judgment, when you're that pure, that wild, you don't need a drink. Right, the chemistry, the connection, the electricity that you have is immeasurable. And so Brian Johnson was the guy that was cool, was reserved, right? I did corporate sales, and I would go in and I would try and act cool. And I remember like my manager would be like, listen, you're all fucked up here. Like you got to walk in, you got to say, this is my first day. I don't know shit. Can you help me? And I was like, oh, I can't do that. Like, you know, I was.
How old are you?
At that right now?
Yes.
I'm 45 now.
Okay.
45. And so I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. And you know what? Hey, I'll try it. And I tried it, and I couldn't believe how effective it was because I spent so much time guarding myself and protecting myself. From 10 to 15, it was a hellacious 5 years of my life. This was my first rite of passage. And I got the shit kicked out of me every day. And so recovering from that, I guarded myself.
Why did you get the shit kicked out of you?
I was the only one of my kind. I was undersized. I was the only white kid at my school. And I was so little.
What city did you live in?
San Antonio, Texas. Okay. And not a good area. And most of the people I went to school with, a lot of these guys are not around anymore. A lot of these guys are dead now. Just a guy that lived a street down the road from me was shot in the head at his house. But back when I went to school, kids took these little guns, these 380s to school. You wore steel-toe boots to school, and no teacher would break up a fight. There's no teacher breaking up a fight. The gym coaches might come run over, but there's so much blood. And if a teacher broke up a fight, that teacher's gonna have his ass handed to him. You know, so
you were bullied when you were a kid?
That's the least that you would call it.
Yeah.
And again, and I allowed it. I didn't have a dad, and I allowed this to happen.
You grew up without a father?
I grew up without a father. I have no memory of my dad whatsoever.
Interesting.
But I'm saying all this in context to say I went through that, I endured that, and then I spent the next 5 or 10 years trying to protect myself, being cool. Yeah. The opposite of primal, wild, and raw. And then I had somebody say, hey, you're too cool. People don't want to help people that are that cool. Let's start to shave off that cool guy. And then I started to figure out, this primal guy's way more fun. You know, like when you can live life with this sort of reckless abandon.
But what is the transition? Like at what age you start to realize this? You said 15 and you're like, okay. And then when did you start to come of age and you're like, all right, I want to be more like this primal guy? Like when did you start to create this idea?
Around 30.
30,
so
okay.
I'm around 30 years old.
So you started living like prior to this then? You were like, what kind of jobs were you working? It was sales stuff?
Pretty much. I was a pharmaceutical rep out of college.
Okay.
And then the progression is like devices and stuff like that. And then I became an entrepreneur. And I did that for about 5 years. And then basically I just went into like entrepreneurial.
What other businesses prior to like all this social media stuff now?
Yeah, so I owned a company called Search Engine IQ. We built like these vertically integrated, we called them virtual vertical monopolies. And so there was a time early on, you could search something like gyms in LA, and I would own the first 3 pages, the first 30 results. You'd have to click to the next page and the next page.
So it's SEO work.
And it's SEO, and then every map result would be mine, right? And so I would buy all those domains. All those domains would be mine. And so then what I would go and do is then I would build a site, and then I'll be promoting. Promoting your gym, and then I'd walk into your. And then after a month of you getting a ton of business, I'd walk in and I'd say, this is what I do, Search Engine IQ, and I build this kind of virtual real estate. You want to lease some from? You've already seen the benefits. I'm responsible for that. You want to lease some from me? And the answer is no. Hey, cool. I'm gonna take it off. I'm gonna show you what it does. And so I did that for a while, and then I met Liver Queen over here, And then when I met Liver Queen, we were snowboarding. She's a retired dentist, and she's like, man, I don't want to work for people. And so we opened up a dental office. We opened up an imaging center. We opened up a dental lab. I just have like this entrepreneurial, this is the evolutionary hunter in us, right? Is like to go create your path, your value in the world, and to take these real risks, not selling coffee mugs and just t-shirts, right? Take real fucking risks that are commensurate with like legitimate reward. And so we ended up doing that. And I would say just a couple of years into doing that, the primal part of me started coming out. You know, like there was enough saying yes and being nice and being mindlessly compliant and keeping up with the Joneses and being in debt like you wouldn't believe. You know, there's enough of that. You know, and
you were in debt for what?
Man,
for the...
yeah. So we bit off way more than we could chew when we got into. So I sold Search Engine IQ. We sold a lot of those other businesses, and we had a consulting business along with that called Synergy Playgrounds. We bought a $6 million building, and then we bought a dental practice, and then we started a lab, and then we started an imaging center. And before you know it, we have 30.
Too much. Yeah.
Oh, it's way too much.
Yeah.
But you know what happened is we had a $500,000 budget to buy a building, and then she goes, "Hey, I want that building." And it was a $5 million building, and I don't know why a bank would have loaned us the money in the first place, because we got like a $40,000 nut just on the building alone.
Right.
And then guess what? Now you need another $2 million just to build it out. You know, and now we're just trying to make ends meet. We can't make payroll. We go through almost a decade of that shit, and everything got repossessed, like the houses, the cars, you name it. Everything except for that building.
Were you on social media at all at this time?
Not at all. We never got on MySpace, never got on Facebook, never did anything related. And you got to remember also, this is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
We're doing this 20 years ago.
Okay.
But the social media when I was around that age was like Facebook and MySpace. Right?
Yeah.
I don't know if there was any of the newer social medias. But long story short, we're like, this is another legitimate rite of passage, right? That like what I said about earlier, 10 to 15, I couldn't be more grateful for those years. And I bet the hardest times in your life, right? Those most severe struggles, the greatest resistance you have forged you right into the weapon.
That's why I want to ask you, what you grew up without a father. How did your father, like, is he not in your life? Did he take his life?
Died.
How did he die?
He was serving in the military.
Oh, okay. At what age? What did he die?
I don't have a memory, so I was probably like 2-ish.
Oh, so like zero
memory.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I grew up without a father. How do you think that affected you?
You know,
your younger days. How do you think it affected your younger days?
Yeah. Well, I had zero mentorship.
You had a mother?
I had a mother. Yeah, I completely had a mother, but I mean, I had zero I was a boy. I needed a man to mentor me.
Yeah.
I needed somebody to say, hey, you're getting the shit handed to you, right? What you need to do is push back. Go get in fucking fights. I don't care what happens, right? You need to stand, because I ended up spending 5 years completely embarrassed of the person that I had become. Looking in the mirror being like, I didn't care if I lived or died for 5 years.
What age was this?
10 to 15.
Yeah.
10 to 15.
You think that was the most defining time in your life?
This was one of them. This was my first real rite of passage. Yes.